that camera and strap in. It's time for another episode of TOGCHAT Live. Get ready for 60 minutes of wall-to-wall photography, including photo news and tips, along with your photography questions in real time, with answers from your host, Olympus visionary, Joe Edelman.
Hey gang, happy World Photography Day and welcome to episode 213 of TOGCHAT Live. I'm excited to let you know that this episode of TOGCHAT is sponsored by PPA, the Professional Photographers of America. PPA is a worldwide community of over 30,000 photographers that provides equipment insurance, education, and business tools made specifically for photographers. I've got a link for you in the description. Check out all the awesome features for PPA members and save $25 on a new membership. That link is also in the chat window. And already this is awesome. I've got photographers checking in from all over the world. So please, if you haven't done so, check in. Leave me a comment. Let me know you're here and where you're watching from. I've got Rick in Connecticut, Charlie in Central North Carolina, Mitch in Northern Ireland. We've got Wolfgang in Berlin, Renee in Switzerland, Robert in Brooklyn, Lynn in New York. I got John in Harrisburg, Ken in the UK. I got David and G. Phillips from San Diego, Sven in over there. All over the place. You guys are like amazing. And it is so cool to see people tuning in to talk about their love of photography. And it's extra special today because today is World Photography Day. And I hope, of course, that you're all healthy and safe and indeed practicing your social distancing. So before we dive in, I've got a serious favor to ask all of you. You see that little thumbs up thing down there? Please click it. You have my word. I'm going to work really hard to help you with your photography for the next 60 minutes. It would help more people find my channel and TOGCHAT if you could do me a solid and hit that thumbs up. And of course, while you're looking down there, feel free to hit that share button to let your photography friends know that we are streaming live on YouTube right now. Or you can just share the link, tog.chat/live. I dropped that in the chat window also. Twitter, Facebook, they're the fastest way to get the word out. So how can I help you with your photography tonight? I've only got a few questions queued up, gang, so start typing your questions or topics in. Make this worth your while, okay? I'll do my best to answer those questions in the next 60 minutes, but remember, this is a gear-free zone. I'll discuss anything having to do with the hows and the whys behind creating great images and marketing yourself. We can always talk about business, and that might include gear if it's a question about how to do something. Just please, don't ask me what your next camera should be. In fact, don't listen to anybody on YouTube about a decision like that. And folks, please, I know that it's fun to chat and have conversations, but I'm going to ask you to save the chat for the questions so that you don't miss anything important while you're typing and so that I don't miss any questions among all the chat noise. That way, we can all learn something. So I mentioned at the top of the show that today is World Photography Day. Hopefully, you were able to pick up your camera today and shoot something. In fact, I'll bet a lot of you don't know the origins of World Photography Day. And you probably just think that it's one of those like weird Hallmark holidays like National I Love My Feet Day. Yep, that's a real holiday. But you missed it. It was Monday. And just so you're prepared, September 19th, so that's a month from today, let's Talk Like a Pirate Day. So, oi, mateys, you better work on that accent. You got 1 month. World Photography Day is a day that's meant to celebrate and pay homage to the history of photography. It is a day that people around the world can communicate their feelings and express themselves through the art of photography. World Photography Day originates from the invention of the daguerreotype, which, of course, was a photographic process developed by Louis Daguerre. On January 9th in 1839, the French Academy of Sciences, they announced this new imaging process that Daguerre had come up with. And then a few months later, on August 19th of 1839, August 19th, the French government, who had secured the patents, proclaimed the invention as a gift to the world. So first of all, thank you to the French, because that is why today we celebrate on August 19th. Now, as we know, no good deed goes unpunished. It was also in 1839, that same year, that an American from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, a photo enthusiast named Robert Cornelius, clicked the world's first selfie. Seriously, that's true. In all fairness, at the time, he didn't know that it would one day be referred to as a selfie, or that it would only be particularly cool if you used a phone with an app that would give you like Disney cartoon character eyes or dog ears or something like that. But truly, he set up his camera, clicked the image by removing the lens cap, after which he ran into the frame. And the reason why most people aren't even aware of this real piece of photography history, he forgot to use the duck lips so that the image was honestly kind of forgettable as a result. So now you know. Also in this week's photo news, it was a fairly quiet week on the gear front, which is awesome. There's some rumors and some kind of pre-announcements, but I'm not going to talk about a pre-announcement. I am, however, sad to report that Russell Kirsch, the man who invented the Pixel, passed away at 91 years of age. Now, I'm not referring to the Google Pixel phone. I mean the digital recording Pixel, the foundation of all of the images that we create. Russell A. Kirsch is an undisputed pioneer of digital imaging. And for all of you who are determined to achieve excellence as quickly as possible, it's worth noting that Kirsch spent 50 years working for the National Bureau of Standards developing that Pixel. The first digital image that he made was actually a scan of a photograph, a 176 by 176 pixel image of his son. He did that in 1957. Each of the pixels was binary. In other words, it was either black or white, and they were square. Now, in a piece of pure photo industry irony, Mr. Kirsch determined pretty quickly after he developed this technology that he shouldn't have used squares. So he developed the idea for a variable-shaped pixel that would provide better resolution with way fewer pixels. Unfortunately, sensor manufacturers ignored all of his improvements. So at the age of 81, he went back to work, and he fully developed the programming to be able to prove his theory. And he's basically made it available to sensor manufacturers. Without getting uber techie, he uses a masking system that creates a 6 by 6 pixel area, and then it intelligently divides those areas into the two sections that have the most contrast before it refuses all the pixels on either side. You can see a video on Petapixel that actually has him describing this. But here's the irony. His tech is still ignored because the camera manufacturers have now backed themselves into this race with each other that everybody buys into that requires improving quality by adding more square pixels. So there you have it. That about sums up the photo news for the week. I mentioned at the top of the show that our sponsor this week is PPA, the Professional Photographers of America. A few people reached out to me after last week's show with questions about the equipment insurance, so I thought I would go ahead and share a little bit more detail this week. As part of your annual PPA membership, you are able to activate the PhotoCare Equipment Insurance, and you'll have up to $15,000 of coverage available, all paid for by PPA. Now, if you have coverage already under your homeowners or other type of policy, this will work as a secondary or excess policy to the other insurance policies that you might already have. But if no other policy exists, it will act as your primary policy when you file a claim for up to $15,000. That alone is worth the cost of the membership. Now, except for drones and unmanned aircraft systems, the PhotoCare Equipment Insurance will cover at depreciated value equipment loss due to fire or theft from forced entry, and breakage of equipment and computer hardware. So as I said, in my opinion, that's worth the cost of the membership. But that isn't the only protection that PPA provides as part of your membership. PPA's indemnification trust. Honestly, it can be a lifesaver, especially for any photographer who's looking to make money. Sometimes things just go wrong, even for the best photographers. Memory cards can fail, shots are missed, clients decide that it's your fault that the clouds block the sunset on their special wedding day. Regardless of the reason, unsatisfied clients making demands, or worse yet, threatening lawsuits, are an emotional and financial pain. PPA's indemnification trust exists to assist active PPA members in the U.S. and Canada when a client claims that they were negligent in providing their services. And that includes data losses, missed shots, or honestly, simply because the client has decided to be unhappy. Assistance ranges from advice on handling matters to direct intervention and even offsetting certain costs or losses. And because it's not insurance, your rates will not go up if you file a claim. The trust also offers background support in these situations by preparing you for court and, if necessary, hiring a local attorney to defend you. So just let that sink in for a minute. Seriously, if you have an unrecoverable loss, total loss on a shoot, the trust could mean the difference between you paying a full refund out of pocket to your client or only having to pay a $200 deductible while the trust provides the rest of the funds. There you go. So let's get into tonight's questions. How can I help you improve your photography? If you are here, come on. What do you need to do to improve? Let's work on that. I do have just 2 questions that came in from my Facebook groups beforehand, which, by the way, if you're not a member of my groups, come on. If you're a people shooter like me, you should join the I Shoot People group. And then for general photo topics, join the Tog Knowledge group. I will go ahead and I will share the links to the groups in the chat window for you guys so that you have it. And I would encourage you, check them out. I hope to see you there. Okay? All right. So the 2 questions that I had that came in early. The first one is from Todd Allen Strong, and his question is, Joe, I'm having a difficult time achieving sharp details in portraits with natural lights. They all seem a bit soft as opposed to when I use the flash. Is this a function of the added light? The shots I refer to were done in open shade. I'm also wondering if the softness would have been from too wide an aperture. 1/500th of a second eye autofocus is on, 60 millimeter focal length, stabilization is on, f2.8 with a 60 millimeter Mzuiko macro. So we're shooting micro four thirds. So that's kind of like 120 millimeter equivalent, right? And let's see here. How does he finish this? Same thing happens with the 45 f1.2. He wants to know, should I stop down for maximum sharpness or just always use flash? I mean, Todd, realistically, neither one of those things is going to solve your problem with any kind of a guarantee. So let's take a step back and let's kind of look at why would we potentially be having, soft images, right? So first of all, I will say that Olympus gear, Mzuiko lenses, not because I'm an ambassador, it's just they're the sharpest optics you're going to find, period. That's a fact. It's tested. It's proven. Done. So that being said, with any manufacturer, there's certainly always a possibility that there's some kind of a manufacturing defect. But the fact that you're having the same problem with both lenses, I seriously doubt that there's a lens problem. Unfortunately, it is probably a user issue, okay? So there's a couple things that I would encourage you to do. There's certainly nothing wrong with stopping your lens down to get maximum sharpness, as you state. But if you're shooting portraits, and especially if you're shooting portraits outside, if you're like most people today, and this is not necessarily a bad thing, you probably want the background to be at least somewhat out of focus. So understand, the more that you stop your lens down, the more depth of field you're picking up, and as a result, the more detail you're going to get in your background. So using the, stop the lens down solution is only workable if your background will allow that, and if your tolerance for detail in the background will allow that. The things that you want to be very, very careful of with regards to your focusing situation are number one, making sure that, yes, you have the eye autofocus on, that's great, but make sure that you are, what was I going to say, Joe? Sorry. Make sure that you're moving your focus spot as a test. In other words, the next time you pick your camera up, actually move your focus spot up to the eye. Don't rely on the eye autofocus. See if you get a sharper image there, because that's going to troubleshoot one other factor. I will be completely honest. I shouldn't brag about this, but it's an amazing feature of the cameras. I've reached the point, and it's not actually a good thing, but I tend to just completely forget to move my focus spot around, because the eye tracking autofocus in the Olympus cameras is just amazing, period. So I tend to kind of let the camera do the work. And one of these days, it's going to bite me in the butt. So it will catch up to me. So I'm not encouraging you to do that, but I am telling you it's that good. But my first step would be, I would want to make sure, move that focus spot up to the eye, make sure that you are really, truly getting it in focus. Other things that I would want to see you look at is I would want to make sure that you are being very, very careful with the way that you're holding the camera. Make sure that you're being steady. At a 500th of a second, you shouldn't be having a problem. But if those couple of things don't solve your problem, Todd, then I got to be honest with you. I would either reach out to Olympus for service, or if you have a dealer, a camera dealer in your area who sells Olympus, I would take your gear in and talk to them and see what their thoughts are. Let them test it out. And by the way, you did mention that you're using the eye tracking autofocus. I am curious what other autofocus you have on, meaning are you on your camera set for manual focus, continuous autofocus, or single autofocus? Obviously, if it's manual focus, the eye tracking autofocus is not actually working. If you're on single focus, well, that's okay, but outside, if there's any movement in your subjects, you're going to do that single focus, and even though the eye tracking is on, it's focused already, so there's movement. So you really want to make sure you have it on CAF, continuous autofocus, and do not put the tracking, the TR on. Do not use that for the kinds of images that you're doing. So start there, do a little bit of troubleshooting, and if you're still having problems, again, reach out to me, or the next step is I would actually follow up with a dealer or with Olympus. Okay? All right, the next question I have that came in early. I see some great questions in the chat room, guys. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. I love it when there's stuff that we can really dig into, okay? So the last question I had from my Facebook group is from Joe. I'm doing my first giveaway for a silent benefit auction. I would like to know, have you ever done anything like that in the past, not just for marketing, but also just to help? And if so, what did you give away, or what was the best thing to give away? Okay, so Joe, I had reached out to you right before I came on the air, but unfortunately, I didn't see your response. The problem with your question is it's kind of really broad. So let me give you some thoughts at least. I'll tell you what my experience has been, and then hopefully give you some things to think about so you keep yourself out of trouble, right? I have done things like that before in the past. Specifically, in my case, it has been portrait sessions that I have given away for auctions. And I'll tell you very honestly, this is probably the last time I did it was at least, where were we at, 2020? At least 12 years ago. And then I had done it a few times actually back in, I hate to say it, but back in the 1980s, the late 1980s, when I was doing portraits and weddings as my primary source of income. As far as the organizations, they were, varied organizations. It was, for me, honestly, it was a little of both. I went into each of them not expecting that I was going to get tons of exposure and tons of business, but really just a matter of looking to actually do some networking in my local community. So when you're doing benefit auctions, one of the things that you want to look at, Joe, is who is the auction benefiting? Like what organization? Depending on the organization, you may be dealing with a group of people that are really not potentially your customers, okay? So the only way that, this thing is really going to benefit you is if the people that this is getting, because where you're not going to benefit, obviously, the folks that buy it, that win it, they are people that essentially made kind of a spur-in-the-moment decision to say, hey, we want to support this organization, so we're going to participate in the auction. What do they have? Oh, we'd love to have a family portrait. Boom. So they go after that. But they weren't necessarily out looking for you or shopping for you in the first place, and other people in the group aren't necessarily out looking for photographers and shopping either. So really where you're going to build the goodwill and where you're going to be able to do some networking are with the folks that are involved in the organization that's running the auction. And frequently in organizations like that, your hierarchy, your higher level are made up of people that are business owners and hold other rather high profile positions within your community. So they're the people that are actually worth networking with, right? And they're the people that you ultimately want access to, especially if you're building like a portrait business, okay? So honestly, my advice would be give a portrait session. Make sure that you don't just give like a sitting fee. I see photographers do that, and honestly, I hate when that happens because basically it's like, yeah, you can get your pictures taken for free, but I am going to charge you out the wazoo for any pictures that you want from it. That's not really, that's not a deal for anybody. So what you want to be looking at is you're giving away your time, and that's the easy part, right? You have to value your time, but it's easy to decide, okay, I'm going to give away my time for this. But the fact of the matter is, if you're actually going to make it work, you're going to give away something of substance, meaning you are going to give them a framed 16 by 20 print or a framed 20 by 24 print. So what you've got to be looking at that point is, what is your overhead to get that 20 by 24 print made, to have it mounted, and then to have it framed, okay? Because that's the donation that you're actually making. Photographers tend to make the mistake of thinking, well, yeah, if I just give away like a shoot, like that's a great deal, And yeah, look, anytime you're giving your time away, there's value to that. But how much value to that is there really to the other people? People will bid more if that big print is involved. And plus, you're then able to say that portrait package is potentially worth $1,000 as opposed to saying, well, it's worth $250 for a sitting, right? So those are the kinds of things that I would consider as you go. Okay? All right. So let's dig in here and see what we've got for questions. I saw my first one come in there. I think it's a social media question, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, no. Okay, so we're going to start right here with Ken. Can you talk about the pros and cons of continuous lighting versus flash lighting? Yeah, sure. You're actually going to hear me talking a lot more about that as the next couple of months come up, because I'm actually preparing right now to make some pretty big changes in my studio. I'll still be working with Godox for strobes. So don't worry, gang. There's not another like brand flash unit suddenly Joe's going to say you should go buy. No. I'm not sponsored by them anyway, but I will still be using Godox when I need strobes. But we have reached a point in the industry where LED lighting is extremely viable for the bulk of what a photographer is going to do in the studio. Obviously, you're still not going to be able to do a great job of stopping action, but depending on the action, depending on how you're lighting it, you can still do that with LEDs too, without necessarily having to raise your ISOs really high, right? So that's really where it's going to come down to for you at this point, Ken, is that your strobes are super fast, and they tend to be brighter than the LEDs. The LEDs are quickly catching up in terms of brightness. The Stella lights, for instance, by Light in Motion are super, super bright, super small. So you've got this powerful unit in a really small size. Lithium battery, you can take them out on location. They're absolutely awesome. You can put modifiers on them. You can do, the whole deal. But it's still not quite as bright as what you're going to get with strobes, what the potential is for doing with strobes. I would argue this. In a perfect world, photographers will have both types of lighting. They will have constant lighting and they will have flash lighting. You see it when people talk about cameras online. You see it talk about when people talk about lighting online, all those kind of things. Everybody wants the one-size-fits-all solution, right? It's like, I want the camera that's going to do the best job for every kind of picture imaginable. Even though I never photograph birds or planes or sports, I might someday. So I want a camera that's going to be great for that. Or they want, the lens, it's going to do everything. Or they want the modifier that's going to do everything. And it doesn't really exist. It's no different than, a carpenter doesn't have one screwdriver for everything they do, or one wrench, or one pair of pliers. There are different tools for different situations. So, Eric, thank you so much, man. I really, really appreciate the question, the super chat. Thank you. So we're reaching a point where LEDs, though, are very, very viable. Especially, I'll be completely honest. One of the bonuses for me to use them in the studio is when I shoot my behind-the-scenes video for you guys. What you'll see in the behind-the-scenes video will be exactly what my camera's recording, because they'll be using this exact same light, which is also kind of a nice little bonus there. But honestly, that's pretty much what it comes down to. It's a matter of cost. If you've already got strobes and you don't have an overwhelming need to go to LEDs, then don't worry about it yet, because they will continue to get more powerful and they will continue to drop in price. But if you are sitting there and you're basically trying to figure out, well, I want to start getting lighting, maybe you're new to photography and you're ready to kind of start to make that step, then it is absolutely worth your while to research both options and look at the costs and what's available. And before you even buy one, you want to kind of dream big, put your credit cards away, hide them, but you want to decide, what's the system that I want to go with? Map out your system on paper, and then just buy one of them. And then you add to them over time as you master them and become confident and comfortable with them. That's honestly, it's the best way to go about doing it. Okay? Alrighty, so let's see here. Cooley, have I tried Sprout Social or Sprout Studio? I have. I hate it. There's my answer. So I see a couple people decided to, chime in and tell you what they thought about it. The challenge that you have today, Cooley, for what you're looking to do, obviously for what Sprout Social is, there are lots of options out there in the marketplace. And honestly, it's kind of like buying a camera or like buying a flash. There is no perfect one. There's just not. I've tried them all. I've done Sprout Social. I've done Buffer. I've done HubSpot. I've done them all, literally. And I've yet to find a perfect one. I will tell you the one that I use. Here, I'm going to bring it up and I will share my screen with you guys. Because I can never remember when I'm doing it off the top of my head if it's .com or if it's .io. So let's see here. There they are. Let me log out so I can show you the home page. And then that way, oh, come on, really? I don't want that. I want, that's what I want. All right. So I use a setup called Publer. And this is it right here. So what I love about Publer, number one, they do have Instagram posting from the desktop. So understand, gang, that at this point, if you are looking for a social media automation tool of any kind, if it doesn't have Instagram publishing from the desktop, don't get it. Don't use it, right? But honestly, what I like about this, plain and simple, it is just a super trimmed down, super easy to use interface, and it has really, really nice analytics, okay? But I'm going to let you guys on a better piece of information to go with it. So here, let me switch back really quick. I'm going to bring up, if you're looking to get those types of things. So just so you guys know, a quick little computer lesson. Those types of programs, Sprout Social, Buffer, Publer, the one that I just showed you, they are what's referred to in the tech world as SaaS solutions, okay? Software as a service is what that stands for. It's SaaS, okay? And SaaS solutions are great. It's basically like a piece of software, but instead of you downloading and installing it on your computer, it lives on the internet, the software, and you log in and you use it through a web browser, okay? So that's basically how that works. Now, the catch is there's lots, like once you start looking at building a business as a photographer, there are lots of great SaaS solutions that can help you. Everything from customer relationship management to social media management. There's tons of great stuff. The problem of it is the cost starts to add up when you start getting all these things, right? So I'm going to let you know here about a website, and bear with me just 1 second. I am getting it up on the screen here. I got to log in, and I am also going to share a link with you, and I will, be completely forthcoming. It is an affiliate link. Okay, let me see if I can actually get it to load, but this will save you a ton of money, guys. And of course it's not loading. Really? All right, so let me go back and bring up the website, and I'll share it with you. I'll see if I can get the link for you in a minute. The website is called appsumo.com. Okay, so I'll put the link in here. So basically, here's how this works. This is a company that exists for the purpose of helping new SaaS solutions get users when they're first starting out. And, they've built this great product and they've tested it, but they need to get real users to start using it. Number one, to make sure that there are no bugs that they've missed. And then number two, to make sure that they're not overlooking kind of obvious features that once people start using it, they're going to be saying like, "Whew, I need this, right? So you sign up for a membership. It's free. They do have a pro membership where you pay $100 a year, $99 a year, and that gets you 10% off of all of them. But as an example, and I think Publer is done. This is where I got Publer. Publer honestly is done. So I paid $39 one time for Publer. That is what they refer to as a lifetime deal. I will never have to pay a penny again. Now, you can go to Publer and you can use the free plan, which gives you 5 social accounts, which is actually adequate for most photographers. But if you want any of the more advanced features, if you want the analytics, any of the other cool stuff that goes along with it, you're going to pay $10 a month, which is one of the cheaper ones out there. But that means it's $120 a year every year. My $39, it's been one time, done. That's it, okay? So as you guys are looking for solutions like that, sign up at AppSumo, check it out. You'll save a ton of money. Okay, so there's your non-photography pro tip for the night. I hope that helps. Okay, all right. Let's see here, and let's see. Scrolling on down here. Cooley, have you ever heard of reception halls that required insurance? Oh, hell yeah! In the wedding business, sure. It's liability insurance. That's a very common practice. It's very normal. Cooley, if you're doing, since you're mentioning a reception hall, I'm going to assume you're doing weddings. If you're a wedding photographer, even if you're doing portraits and that professionally, if you're taking money, you should have a minimum of $1 million liability insurance policy, minimum. Okay, like otherwise, don't do it. Simply don't do it. In today's world, people are way too litigious. So you want a minimum of $1 million policy. That is my opinion. That's the number that I have always worked with, and it has done me well. And I will tell you, if you're a PPA member through their membership, they actually have discounted policies for liability through their insurance companies that they make available to members. But it is not uncommon at all as a photographer that a venue would require you. And the reason being, you're potentially going to go in and potentially set up lights and all that kind of stuff. And since you are a vendor of sorts, they are potentially, if it's a particularly litigious guest, if people are drunk and they're dancing and they knock over one of your light stands and the light stand falls down and lands on a table, knocks over a candle, starts a fire, the place burns down, whatever, okay, you're involved in that mix of problems that happen. Or for that matter, one of your strobes blows up and curtains catch on fire that it's sitting right in front of. Yeah, they don't want that to have to go in their insurance policy because that increases their operating overhead. So they expect you to have that, that insurance. So that should be an automatic thing. Portrait photographers, wedding photographers, even commercial advertising photographers. If you have your own studio, you're going to bring models into your studio, any of that kind of stuff, absolutely. You should have a liability insurance policy. Okay? And it's basically general liability is what you're after. All right? And scrolling on down here, for Beverly, I'm having an issue with the color on my photos when posting on Instagram. It's like I have to edit all over again and get it to where it was on my computer. What do I need to do? Help me, Joe. Beverly, it could be a couple of things. Number one, I would have to ask the question, Beverly, if you're here, let me know. Are you doing color management on your computer? Meaning, do you have like a Spider device or an X-Rite iStudio where you are creating color profiles for a computer? That would be the first thing. The second thing, does your color management tool, if you have one, does your color management tool actually carry through to your phone? Some do, some don't. Aha, so you're not doing color management. So right out of the box, Beverly, that's a potential problem, okay? The other thing that could be happening for you is, basically where I'm headed with this, by the way, it's not Instagram, it's you, okay? What you need to do is you need to make sure that when you save your files for the internet, whether it's for Facebook or whether it is for Instagram, make sure that you are saving them in the sRGB color space, okay? Many of us shoot in Adobe RGB or Pro RGB to have a wider color gamut, especially if we want to do printing. But when it's going on the web, if you want your colors to match, it needs to be sRGB, period. Because every browser on the web, that is its base profile. There's a couple browsers, and I do not remember off the top of my head, I think Firefox may be one of them, that do recognize Adobe RGB. But some of the main browsers only recognize sRGB. So right out of the box, that gives you a conflict in your color space. So you just automatically save everything to sRGB if it's going to go to the internet. You can keep your main files, your primary files in Adobe RGB or Pro RGB. That's completely fine. But that file that you're going to send out, okay, you're going to deal with that. The other thing, Beverly, is that depending on your phone, iPhone, I'm sure Android has similar features now. I'm not going to lie. I know nothing about Androids. But on my iPhone, iPhone has a feature which by default they turn on. And that is where the phone looks at the overall brightness of the room and it adjusts the screen and the color of the screen based upon the overall brightness in the film, or in the room, okay? And if you go in and you play with that setting, you'll see that it actually sometimes it makes the screen very blue tinted. Other times it makes the screen very yellow tinted. Well, that means it's also making your pictures blue tinted and yellow tinted. So there are some aspects of getting things on the internet that you have no control. The fact that, I'm sitting here using two computer screens that are extremely expensive and they're calibrated. The next guy could be looking on a 6-year-old laptop that's been banged around and never calibrated, or it even could be somebody like my wife. My wife is a college professor. I could show her something and say, hey, do those colors look right? And she's like, yeah, it looked great to me, because that's not her thing. So basically you want to try and do your color management first. That's going to be step one. Step two, make sure that you don't have anything going on with the phone in terms of the way the screen is set up. And then also, what was the other thing I was going to say? Gosh, I forgot. Oh, file size. File size is generally not going to mess with the color. However, there are correct sizes for the files to upload. Excuse me. And then there are incorrect sizes. So if product placement, there we go. If you are uploading full res files to like Instagram and Facebook, you're doing it wrong. That is not the way to do it, because what's going to happen is Facebook, Instagram, all of them, they are going to run a compression utility on your file, which basically means they're going to kind of take a JPEG and they're going to JPEG it. They're going to go through it with computer software and say, ooh, we don't need this one. We don't need this zero. We're going to get rid of these 3 ones. We're going to keep this 0, but we're going to get rid of those 2 zeros. And they're going to compress that file down mandatorily even more. So there will be a quality loss. Now that generally is not going to be a color issue, but it still has an impact in terms of degrading the overall image quality. So start there. Those things should hopefully help out. G. Phillips, you mentioned in our previous talk chat that you were going to review the X Pen tablet. Has that happened? It has not happened. I'm still working on it. I'll be completely honest with you. What I did learn, though, excuse me, I can tell you basically that I actually really love it. It is amazing and a game changer. But I ran into a hitch. So I've been in touch with a company, and they're looking into seeing if they can get me a fix. But in the meantime, I'm using it on my laptop. On my main setup that's right in front of me here, this machine that's right over here, this is a 5K iMac, okay, 27-inch that's sitting there. And this is a 27-inch LG screen. This is the one that Apple, recommends that you pair them with, and it is a gorgeous screen. The way the tablet works, it takes over as a screen, which that's the whole idea. You're seeing Photoshop on the tablet. But the way their software is set up, and it's the X Pen tablet software, you can't have it as a third screen. It can only be a second screen. So the problem is, if I want to go ahead and do retouching then, the only way I can make the tablet work on this setup is to actually unplug my secondary monitor, and then the tablet will work. I'm not a big fan of having to do that because during the course of a day, there are times, actually the image that I posted today, it probably only took about 25 minutes to actually process that image, but it actually spanned out over about 3 hours because I was doing email and doing some other stuff. And I wasn't sure about the way it was coming together. So I would go away from it for a while and do a little bit of work and come back. So there's no way I was going to be popping that plug in and out the whole time. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed for that because I do. Its resolution is more than enough. It's extremely responsive. Being able to work right on the image, I'm not going to lie, it's really cool. But I want to hold off on the video until I can see if they're going to be able to do that. Not that I'm going to trash it or pan it. You just heard me say I think it's really cool. But what I've been doing is actually leaving the tablet in my bedroom. And on nights where I'm not ready to go to sleep early, if my wife has already packed it in for the night, I'll open up the laptop and plug it in. And I'll actually sit there with the tablet on my lap and do some retouching. And it's really pretty sweet. So video to come, but full disclosure, that's exactly where I'm at with it. It is a little bit of a hiccup. But again, this is a new product line for them. They've been very receptive speaking to me about it. So I'm optimistic that they'll come up with a solution. Okay? All right. Photo share shops. I only give framed prints. I never want to provide service, as you know the expectations, and that's a real problem. Okay, so this is in reference to the question that Joe had about giving like something as a prize or whatever at a benefit auction. Photo share shops, I am 1,000% on board with what you're saying. I mean, basically, as I said, giving something tangible is much better than just providing the service, much better. And it's going to have a greater perceived value to the people that are going to be bidding. So yeah, I'm completely with you there. Okay. Randy, this is on the same topic. I go around my little town and take pictures of business places for them, and then I post on Google Maps. 2.2 million views, level 7 local guide. Now, very cool, Randy. Interesting enough, I know another Randy that does that. And photographs like all of the he's down in Tennessee. And he photographs all the churches all around, and he's got millions of views of these images. And I think it's great because it's not really a paid job. There's some little bonuses that they kind of throw your way here and there for stuff, but the folks that do it really get into it, and that's cool. And Randy, the best part of it is, if you were to decide that you wanted to kind of turn pro, the connections that you're making and the images that you're creating are images that would actually be very valuable, not necessarily in resale, but in terms of being able to make those connections, open doors, introduce yourself to various companies and businesses. So they could come in very handy in that respect. Okay. All right. Let's see. Lawrence Lay, what is your advice when shooting first-time models, and is TFP necessary for them at first? Gosh, Lawrence, you should have taken my class just last night. It's called Shooting Beauty, and it's really a big part of it is about working with models, etc. So working with first-time models, if they're truly first-time, then they're not really a model yet either, right? So let's understand, actually, let me take a step back in fairness, okay? If we go to Webster's Dictionary, Merriam-Webster. So you can find it at www.m-w.com. And we type in the word model. I'm paraphrasing, but basically you will see that it says that a model is a person that poses for an artist. And depending on the dictionary, I don't remember if it's Webster's, they have the word photographer in, brackets, right? So it doesn't say anything about making money. It doesn't say anything about being signed by a modeling agency, and it doesn't say anything about payment. It just says that a model is a person that poses for an artist. That's it, right? So that being said, for the quote-unquote first-time model, it's not like they are experienced or bring a specific skill set. You're photographing them because they're pretty. So essentially, it's a trade, right? And I'm not even going to use TFP because honestly, TFP needs to be banned. The concept needs to be banned. The attitude needs to be banned. The idea that it's cool and all that stuff. But if you had taken those classes, you would understand that. Those classes are coming up again. I will tell you here. Let me go ahead. I'm going to take you guys over to my website. I'm going to click on the presentations link up at the top of the page. And I will share the link to this page with you guys so you can see it. The two classes that I'm talking about here, they're coming up later this fall. The one that took place last night, which talks a lot about finding models and working with models for the first time. It's this one that you see right here where my mouse is. It's Shooting Beauty, the Psychology and Techniques. And then another one that would help you tremendously, Lawrence, with working with models. And it also discusses a little bit about finding models. And that is this one on November 19th, Shoot Prep, the Photographer's Guide to Setting Up a Successful Shoot. Both of those are 2-hour-long classes. Mega detail. We go into anything and everything that could potentially go wrong in setting up a shoot, and I tell you how to avoid it, okay? So I would encourage you to check those out. The short answer to your question, Lawrence, is you do what your subject and you both find beneficial and are willing to agree with, meaning there are no rules. The rule is treat your subject like a human being. Be a good, caring photographer. Because understand that the relationship with the subject, and I don't mean like physical or emotional, no, I just mean friendship. Relationship with your subject is more important than anything else that you will do in the course of putting that shot together. Because if you are not able to establish a relationship of trust with your subject, you ain't going to get squat with that camera. I don't care if it's a Sony. Ain't going to happen. Sorry. Had to go there. But no, it's not going to work. Okay? All right. Awesome questions tonight, guys. Awesome questions. All right, David, you're shooting a wedding and you misplaced your gear. And is the next thing like you have a coronary and they have to call the ambulance? Or how's that work? Randy, thank you so much for the super chat. I appreciate it. Thank you. Blue Jays today. Very cool. So you're shooting a wedding, you misplaced the gear. The only lenses you have is your 24, 35, and 50. What do you do? So like, okay, is this like a test question, like a hypothetical? Or is this like you did this? I'm just curious, you know? I actually, so David, I don't think you've seen enough of me talking on TOGCHAT. That's okay. I'm glad you're here. But if I had a 24, 35, and a 50, and I'm going to assume you're a full frame shooter, just since you're picking those focal lengths. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming you're a full frame shooter. I'd be ecstatic to shoot a wedding with a 24, 35, and a 50. Just would. I would have no problem with that. So you got to remember, though, David, I started my career way back when, right out of high school, as a newspaper photographer. My two go-to lenses, I used to carry two bodies, film, and one camera had a 24 millimeter on it. The other one had a 180 2.8. That 180 was only used if I had to shoot like across the street or sports. That was it. Otherwise, the 24 millimeter, I took 90% of my pictures with that. Because as a newspaper photographer, the first thing you learn is fill the frame. You gotta fill the frame. Because oftentimes pictures in newspapers would get printed very small. So you had to make the subject as big as possible in the image. So the 24 millimeter would force me to get really, really close to fill the frame. And because it's a really wide lens, it creates a perspective that when somebody looks at the picture, the finished shot, they kind of feel like they are there, like in the picture, being a part of it instead of just observing it from a distance. So if there's something I missed there that I could be more helpful, please tell me. But to me, I mean, I'd be really stressing about the gear that I lost. Yeah, that's a problem. Uh, but I would not be that devastated having to use those 3 lenses at all. Not at all. Okay. All right. So scrolling on down here, where are we at? Okay. Soren Man, Dave here. I know it's best to get the shot in camera, but when you can't, is Topaz denoise AI and Gigapixel AI a good option for high ISO noise and enlarging to allow cropping? Yeah, so first of all, I'll give you full disclosure, Dave. I've used both of them like once or twice each, minimally. So I don't have a ton of experience with them. But I will tell you this. My experience with them was very good. Quality was excellent. And amongst other pros that I converse with from time to time, and even some conversations that I've had at some of the trade shows with other pros, they're the go-to, hands down. So yes, I appreciate the first part of your statement because I'm all about get it right in the camera. Done. But if it's a situation where, it's get the shot or push the limits and then use some software afterwards, yeah, Topaz does great stuff. I mean, it's interesting to me. They, in the general community, they're kind of this software company that tends to run a little bit under the radar because they don't go out and do tons of big advertising and all that kind of stuff. But simply from a straight up quality standpoint, they're awesome. So yeah, I mean, pretty much all their stuff is really good. Okay. All right. Scrolling on down here. From Craig. Joe, do you have any experience with documentary street photography of people in their environment? Advice or suggested resources? Well, I mean, not walking out the door and saying, okay, I'm going to be a street photographer today. No. Okay. Do I have experience photographing strangers that I don't know on the street? I have better experience than a street photographer does. I'm not trying to be cocky, so let me explain, okay? As a newspaper photographer, back in the late 70s, early 80s, yes, I'm that old, but back then, number one, it was the heyday of photojournalism. So I had the good fortune of working for newspapers at a time period when they used lots of pictures and they used them big. Number two, we photographed everything. And one of the most popular things that we photographed back then, we called it spot news. Meaning every car accident, train wreck, fender bender, fire, barn fire, you name it, we were there, okay? So basically what that meant that as a newspaper photographer, I was walking into other people's lives, and I actually got to experience it, not just take a picture of it, but I got to experience it firsthand. I always say, touch it, taste it, feel it, be there for 10 or 15 minutes. But what that meant is that I was walking into other people's lives at the highest of highs and the lowest of lows, when they certainly do not want a camera there. And so you learn very quickly in those situations how to be able to approach people, even if necessary, how to kind of blend into the woodwork. And I just told you a few minutes ago, I wasn't one for being a wuss about my approach to shooting. If I was photographing people, even in a traumatic situation, my preference was to put that 24 millimeter lens on and get in there. I actually had a true story. I will try and find them for you guys. It'll take me a little while because they're I have some old transparencies, some old 35 millimeter transparencies back in my newspaper days that were taken at a house fire. And this is a fully involved house fire. There's flames shooting out all the windows. It's like crazy. And there's a group of like 3 firemen like running a hose up to the window. But there's 4 people. I'm the 4th guy. I'm like right there with my 24 millimeter, like right at the end of the hose line where the guys, the flames are shooting out over their heads, the whole bit. Like that's how I approach it. So, the idea of having to deal with people on the street, I actually, for me, and I'm not saying this will be the same for you, okay? And I'm not trying to brag. It's just simply, it's a matter of experience. It's having done this for years. I don't really separate that from what I do in the studio. If I'm going to walk up to somebody in the street and I'm going to aim a camera in their face, it's actually really rude, just as a human being, to not engage with them. It's just rude. And especially if it's a homeless person. Use that as an example. It's doubly rude because here's a person that's just completely down on their luck. And I'm going to make a picture of them for my benefit. Now, full disclosure, before I'm not trying to be some saint. I fully subscribe to the shoot first, ask questions later plan. So if it's a matter of I see somebody doing something and I'm like, I got to get the shot, boom, I will shoot the shot without having any interaction with that person. But I will then make it a point to have the interaction. I'm not just going to walk away. I'm not just going to disappear. I'm going to have that interaction. So it's really no difference about building a relationship. Photographing people. I don't care if you're doing street. I don't care if you're doing portraits, weddings. I don't care what you're doing. Photographing people is a relationship game, right? Just is. So that would be my response. If there's something more specific that you're looking for, Craig, give me a little bit more detail and I'll try and help you out. But okay. Beverly's asking, now that I sold her on a color calibrator, X-Rite or Spider, which do you prefer? How often do you have to calibrate? Beverly, I use the X-Rite iStudio. That's my preferred one. But you don't necessarily need that. I like the iStudio because it's designed to go all the way from basically the camera, create a camera profile, all the way through printing and create a printer profile. You don't necessarily need that. So you have to decide, one, do you need that? And Beverly, so that you're not hating me, if you buy a color calibrator, you need to set aside time. You need to read all of the directions. Make sure that you have a yellow or orange, whatever color, I don't care, but a highlighter with you when you read the directions. And if you're reading the directions on a PDF on your computer screen, use the highlighter tool on the Adobe Acrobat Reader and read the whole manual. Every single thing that you don't understand. And if it's your first time, there may be a lot of things. It's okay. Highlight everything you don't understand. Everything. If you highlight a lot, don't get depressed. Just walk away from it for a day. Okay? But then come back. And then what you got to do is you go highlighted section by highlighted section. And then you're going to go to Google or YouTube. And you're going to type that in. And you're going to learn what that means. What are they talking about? I don't understand those words. Let me find out. Don't calibrate your computer until you've done that. Because you can also screw yourself up in terms, it's fixable. You're not going to destroy your computer, but you can also make a mess out of your color if you don't really pay attention to what you're doing. You're getting into an advanced utility, which it's very doable. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm just giving you the warning. There are no shortcuts. You need to make sure you read through everything, understand it, and then do it. And as far as how often, at least once a month. They will give you the option to it'll set reminders for you, so it'll pop up on your screen and tell you. I do mine once a month. If you really, really want to be fussy, you do it once a week. Okay? But yeah, I do mine once a month, and that works out fine. I think ultimately, if I was working on an older machine, I might do it a little bit more often. But, and my this machine's kind of right on the edge of what I would start to consider older. But right now, it seems to manage things just fine. I'm not noticing a difference or noticing any color problems like at the end of the month cycle compared to the beginning. So I'm still doing 30 days. Okay. All right. Let's see there. David chimed in. He's using an X-Rite every 4 to 6 weeks. Okay. So that's actually an interesting idea, David. David's mentioned here he's aware of some photographers chipping in for a community device to save some money. That's actually a great idea, provided, the only thing I would throw into that mix is make sure the people that you're going into, as a community group with are people that you can trust not to abuse the equipment and to take care of it, keep it clean, that kind of stuff. Most of those devices come with a case, make sure the stuff stays in the case, all that type of thing. So, but yeah, I mean, that's totally doable because it's not like you need to have it with you every day. So that would totally be doable, okay? Orthus, question, does a 50 millimeter lens on an APS-C 1.6 crops, that's what, Canon, right, the 1.6, is that long enough for headshots? Orthus, sure, that's long enough for headshots. I would just try to avoid getting super, super close. In other words, doing like a really tight kind of crop headshot, because even though it's a 1.6 crop, it's still a 50 millimeter lens, right? So you can start to get a little bit of bloat if you get too close. But if you're doing like an acting headshot, like head and shoulders, right? Or even like a traditional kind of bust up portrait with a 50 on an APS-C, absolutely, that would be fine. I will tell you, when you have a little bit of money and you can afford a bit of an upgrade, an 85 millimeter or 100 millimeter are going to give you a slightly more pleasing effect. But the 50 will work absolutely wonderfully, okay? The difference between the 50 and the 100 The only people that will ever, or even the 85, the only people that will ever notice it are people like me and all these other people that are here in TOGCHAT. Your subjects will never notice it, ever. So part of what that tells you is don't stress about the lens. Your 50's fine. Put your effort and your energy into building relationships with your subjects, using great lighting, and getting awesome, lively expressions. And then you'll have great pictures. The lens will be fine. Okay? All right. Scrolling on down here. Let's see, Randy. It must have been interesting being a newspaper photographer. I almost got a non-paying gig as a forest fire photographer. Being a newspaper photographer is the greatest thing in the world. I would stop all of this tomorrow if I could go back to doing newspaper work and pay my bills. Newspapers blew it. You know, it's their own fault. The industry destroyed itself. And that's not popular with people that are still hanging on in the newspaper business, but that's how I look at it. Newspapers blew it. And again, I actually explained to you guys the part that why I loved it so much, because I didn't come home and watch things on the news. I was there. And I literally got to experience other people. Every day I got to experience other people's lives. Touch it, taste it, feel it, be a part of it, see it, understand it, experience it. And then at the end of it, I get to go back to my life, which was so cool. I mean, it was absolutely the coolest thing ever. You know, working with models, believe me, they can still bring the drama. So you know, there's still a little bit of that. But yeah, it's I love what I do. But yeah, newspaper work was my first love. And look, I'm not asking for any sympathy. I made, you know, as a young guy, I made a lot of choices that also got in the way of that. I was married very young. I had my son when I was 22 years old, and you know, I'm blessed to have him, so I can't complain. But you know, the lifestyle of newspaper work kind of got in the way of that, and so had to make choices. That's how I wound up starting a studio and doing portraits and weddings and all that kind of stuff. So for me, honestly, no regrets, because it's been an adventure, and each one of those things teaches me more things and teaches me new things and gives me new experiences. But all right, last one here. I'm over time. Shocker, as always. Bob Ackerman. Joe, I found your response to David's post about only have a 25-35 and 50 lens interesting. I remember you saying be very careful with focal lengths 50 or less because of distortion. Well, okay, so yes, Bob, I said that, but you're only using part of the quote, because depending on when I said that, I would have also added in things like, if you're shooting a building, be careful of the distortion because you don't want the building to be keystoning and look like it's falling over or falling down on top of you, right? The same with if you're shooting a group shot with a wide angle lens, you don't want the people at the end of the group going, you know, or you don't want to be so close where the people on the end, their faces are like stretched. So you do have to pay attention, but that doesn't mean that you can't still work with those short lenses and getting close. And honestly, even having some distortion. The distortion is part of what makes it feel like you are there as part of the scene. Because with our eyes, we see all the way out to 180 degrees. Now, we don't have keystoning and we don't have distortion only because our brains correct for that, right? Because the fact of the matter is here, just to really mess with all your minds, and I'll tell you what to Google so you don't have to believe the guy on YouTube. So right now, if you stare straight at your computer screen where I'm at, my face, the fact of the matter is the only thing that is actually in color in your brain is the middle of the image, my face. To your brain, everything around my face, in fact, imagine a C shape, right? So like that. Everything outside that C shape, or oval, oval, is actually blurry and black and white. But yet that's not what you think you see. You think you see a color image and it's all in focus. What I'm referring to is something you can Google. It's called the foveal view, F-O-V-E-A-L, foveal view. So the peripheral that we're dealing with, okay, our brains correct all the lines and everything. The camera doesn't necessarily do that. And believe me, I'm not saying, hey, you got a 24 millimeter, go ahead and, you know, no, okay, you don't have to do all that. I'm just basically saying, hey, you can use it to your creative advantage, and then it can also destroy your shot. So you still have to be, you know, kind of really careful with it in that sense. All right. Oh, Bob, it was one of my workshops with models, 3 models about 3 or 4 years ago. Okay, yeah, that must have been a while ago. So yeah, I mean, if you're talking about portraits, Bob, which would have been if it was one of my workshops, we were probably shooting a model or a portrait or a headshot. Yeah, then I wouldn't want to use the 24 to 35 unless I had no choice, meaning there was just not enough space. So yes, in that context, I definitely would have pushed people against it. In fact, usually where that comes up in the workshops that I used to do, I would be giving to people that had the 24 to 70 zooms a hard time because I'd go look at their zoom lens and they were at like 30 millimeter trying to shoot portraits, which is just a bad idea, okay? But for weddings, you're shooting groups, you're shooting overall scenes, you're shooting full-length picture, all that. You can work with the shorter lenses. And I'm not saying that, by the way, because I said that my favorite's a 24, I'm not saying that he should have done every image with a 24. He had a 50. Nifty 50 is a nifty 50 for a reason. It's basically the same perspective as what our eyes see in terms of size relationships and depth and all those kind of things. So there's no reason that you couldn't get through a wedding with a 50 millimeter lens. Okay? All right, gang. We survived. Another one in the books, right? So again, I just want to give real quick before I sign off a special thanks to PPA, the Professional Photographers of America, for sponsoring tonight's episode. Remember, there's a special link in the description. Gets you $25 off of your new membership. And like I told you tonight, it's worth it even just for the equipment insurance. So please be sure to check it out. And gang, as always, thank you for tuning in. Thanks for an awesome night of chatting about all things photography. Happy World Photography Day. If you have not picked up your cameras today, well, depending on where you are in the world, you still got a little bit of time, so do it, okay? And remember, the iPhone's a camera if that's all you have time for. But whatever you do, please remember, gang, these words.
Thanks for watching another live episode of TOGCHAT. Now, pick up that camera and shoot something, because your best shot is your next shot. So keep learning, keep thinking, and keep shooting. Adios.